Who will be Baylor's starting quarterback come August when they kick off the 2024 season? We don't exactly know. And as we heard this weekend, Dave Aranda might not know yet either. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by LinkedIn. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. For the first time in this spring ball, we get to hear from Dave Aranda, and he talked quarterback competition over the weekend. He might have hinted a little bit at who has the edge in this quarterback race. Also, John Jakus was nice enough to talk to those of us at ESPN Central Texas and talk about why Baylor was such a foundation for him to be the next coach at FAU. And the person he credits might surprise you a little bit. And speaking of foundations, we are in the glory days, it seems, of women's college basketball. But did that just miss Baylor? Or did Baylor have a lot to do with why it's right now? Starting with football. We are now 12 days, as you're listening to this, until Baylor's spring game, which will be Saturday, April 20th. And it will be one that, for the second year in a row, at least, that Baylor fans will watch with a vested interest to see if there's someone who can, jump off the page, maybe the third year in a row, to see someone who will jump off the page and take the starting quarterback role. Or at the very worst, someone we can watch as fans and say, that guy should be the starting quarterback. I will certainly be partaking in that. We're just under 2 weeks away, so very exciting towards that. But they have been playing a month of spring ball now, so maybe, just maybe, the head coach will let us in on a little bit of a secret on who has the upper hand. Here's what Dave Aranda said over the weekend about the quarterback competition.
The competition is one where it's they're in and out of reps, and so someone starts with the ones, the other guy's rotating with the twos, and then the next day you'll get the reverse of that. And so what you see out of Sawyer is a really strong care factor, and then you see the ability to hit on intermediate and timing throws, and then his ability to run the ball, on the designed runs, I think is a positive. And then you see leadership with him, and then with Quan, you see his ability to extend plays, his ability to hit deep shots, and his ability to make something happen when something's not there, right? Whether it's a run or pass. And so I think because a lot of the runs are reads, and so I think he's for sure there's an 11th guy you got to defend when it's Dequan. And then,
so did he give a hint? Not really, but he does give you a mini scouting report on each of the two guys in question, that being, of course, Dequan Finn, the transfer from Toledo, and the incumbent backup quarterback of Sawyer Robertson, who came in from Mississippi State last year. So he gives a little bit of each of what they do well, and I don't think this surprises much of anyone, but it is a totally new offense, so to speak. It's not an offense that Dequan Finn played in. It's one that Sawyer Robertson kind of did play in high school, and kind of the same offense he played in at Mississippi State. Remember last year I was talking about, oh boy, let's give Sawyer some time. He's learning a whole new offense going to the wide zone. That's still true, but it is something that he's used to, and it's something that's within his skill set. And we also have seen Baylor run this offense before. It was a decade ago to 15 years ago, but it is what we have seen before, or something just like it. So there I can, compare it to former Baylor greats. So he talks about Sawyer Robertson, and he's good at the timing throws, he said, and sees the leadership, and he can run. He can run. So that, to me, sounds like the skill set of, not the same player, but the skill set of Nick Florence, Bryce Petty, the back-to-back ones, and pretty successful years for Art Briles' offense in those Baylor teams that went on to win back-to-back Big 12 championships that will be honored this year. That's something specifically Petty was great at, the timing. Teams would try to play a zone defense to try and take away deep balls. It didn't work against Baylor, and so much of that was timing throws. The vertical routes, getting enough touch on the ball, throwing it to the empty space where there were no defenders, that only your receiver could get it. That makes sense. Sawyer has played in that before, good at that. And what that also means or implies is that he maybe doesn't have like thread it through the needle kind of arm. We haven't been able to see that yet in his Baylor career. When he was out there for the couple of games that he was in 2023, it was a lot of intermediate and timing patterns. So we'll see on that. What he said about Dequan Finn is what we heard from the Toledo people. Extends plays, hits the deep balls, makes something out of nothing. And I love that last part he said about him. An 11th guy on the field to defend. That is something that has taken off so much in the NFL the last decade or so, decade and a half, with guys running the pistol, whether it was, Russell Wilson or Colin Kaepernick for his short burst of real peak in there. And now you even see it somewhat with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, obviously with Lamar Jackson, but guys who you need to key on. You can't just have them sit back there and you could, drop 8 people back and take away his options. You can't, because that guy is an option. And to me, that sounds like, again, the skill set, but not necessarily the player of an RG3 or a Seth Russell, 2 other guys that have played in this offense. And not the deep ball part, but the extending plays part, a lot like Charlie Brewer, which won Baylor some games, as a matter of fact, his way of extending plays. And that's something we did not see from Blake Shapen at the end of his time. He had so much of the Charlie Brewer look, and we had seen some of him getting outside of the pocket and running in the end of that 2021 season and a bit at the beginning of 22. And then he got hurt, he got banged up, and we didn't see that again at all. So that automatically makes you easier to defend when your quarterback cannot extend a play. So Sawyer Robertson's a real good athlete and can get out there and run, but he's not the scrambler the way Dequan Finn is. And that is something that got him a lot of wins at Toledo, a lot of awards and a conference championship at Toledo, and something that could absolutely help this Baylor team. But listening to that, those guys both are showing some skills that are very valuable in this style of offense. If I had to pick right now, I would lean towards Dequan Finn, and most of it is because, I know we haven't seen him in person the way we've seen Sawyer Robertson, but with all that we've heard and seen on tape and the fact that Spavital went out and got this guy, you'd have to think that he is someone who is molded towards the kind of offense they're looking to run. And if Sawyer Robertson beats him out in camp, that means you've got a stud in Sawyer Robertson. So either way, it's a great situation for Baylor at the quarterback position versus rolling out with Sawyer Robertson in a wide zone offense this year. These options are better than that. I'm not saying these are 8-4, 9-3 options, but they're better than what you would have been rolling with if you had stood pat, if you would run a similar offense, if you didn't go out and get a guy like Dequan Finn. So we'll see more on April 20th during the spring game, but I don't know that we will know right after that day. I'm sure Dave Aranda and Jake Spavital will know, but this could be something that does linger into fall camp. So this will be the story, make no mistake about it, through the Baylor football spring game and potentially into fall camp as well. Who is going to be the quarterback for the Bears when they take on Tarleton next year? Guess we will just have to get out there and judge it for ourselves. But of course, what we cannot judge for ourselves, because people have done that for us, is how great LinkedIn Jobs is. And I've been telling you guys about it. It's the number one place if you're a small business looking to hire. Like, they know that you're wearing a ton of different hats. You might not have the time or the resources to just go out there and make it 24 hours a day. I'm looking to hire. They get that. Okay. It's not like any other job board. It's got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to pools that you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn is doing that work while making the process easy and intuitive for you. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And they are constantly finding ways to make that process even easier. I didn't think it could be done, but they're working on it. They even just launched a feature that helps you to write the job descriptions yourself to make that process easier. That's why 2.5 million, not 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. And of course, terms and conditions do apply. Baylor basketball is reeling from having a couple more assistants leaving the program after what was another very successful regular season, but a disappointing and in an early exit in the NCAA tournament, second round exit for the third year in a row. And since then, Bill Peterson left the program at the end of last week. And then before that, John Jakus, the co-associate head coach for the Baylor Bears, took the job as the head coach, full stop, at FAU, Florida Atlantic University. And he is in a bit of a whirlwind right now, as anyone would be in a new coaching job, with guys testing the waters of the transfer portal, some guys testing the waters of the NBA draft. Some might be coming back, some might not. And Jakus also has to fill out a staff. And we caught up with John Jakus on the Matt Mosley show. And I just asked him, hey, something that we've heard about is this, or seen in action, really, is this Scott Drew coaching tree. And I said it on this show. Right now, he's the active coach with the best coaching tree. And I had my theory as to why that was. A couple of theories, as a matter of fact. But I asked John Jakus, you are, now another one in line. This is really the fourth or fifth active head coach in college basketball that was a Scott Drew assistant within the last 10 or 15 years. What is it? What is the secret sauce? What is Scott Drew doing that people want a part of and that gets you guys these head coaching jobs? And John Jakus gave a ton of credit to Scott Drew, but that was not the only coach in the Drew family that he gave a ton of credit to.
This only happens because Scott hires us. And he's got a good record of who he hires. And I think his understanding of what it means to be a CEO, not just a head coach at the Division I level, is really important. And that can be best expressed a lot of times by who you bring on your staff. So I just think he's a great judge of people and talent, not just with players, but with coaches. So him giving that gift to me, I'll never be able to pay him back. And then probably the second thing I don't know that everybody understands is that he worked for his dad. So when you work for your dad, and your dad's, in a safe job and a Hall of Famer and doing well, he's going to share with you so you can learn everything. So Homer put Scott in every single position he could before he got to Baylor. He's a head coach for a year at Valpo before he came to Baylor. So Scott has the same philosophy. So if it comes to recruiting internationally, he's going to let you go and support you and put you in the best position possible. If he's going to let you work out with the guards, he's going to let you change the way things are done, and as long as it fits his system. And we went from not having draft picks to having multiple draft picks back to back at the guard position because of the freedom and support that Scott showed me and the rest of the staff. And then when it comes to working on offense with him, we went from posting up Jonathan Motley 600 times a year to run a European ball screen offense with Roller. So he treats us like his dad treated him. And we get to do things that other assistants probably don't get to do at other places because that's just how he learned. And Homer's incredibly gracious. The coaching tree, I guess, is Scott's, but in my mind, it's really Homer's. And just as a dad, he did a wonderful job, and all of us have been blessed by that.
So it's not even just Scott Drew's coaching tree. It is Homer Drew's coaching tree. And when you hear him explain it, it makes a lot of sense. Now, this is going off one of my theories of, Scott really gives a lot of responsibility to his assistants, and you kind of, you hear about it all over the place and you don't really see it in action as a fan, but we were able to see it through things like Our Time on ESPN Plus and some of the Baylor Plus content that goes out. You see how much these coaches are working, these assistants are working one-on-one with guys or working in the huddles or drawing up plays. It's Jakus, it's Alvin Brooks III, it's Ty Beard, it's Jared Nunes, it's all of these guys, Bill Peterson too. And I thought that was such an enlightening answer because it's something I hadn't thought of before, was that Homer Drew was obviously a legend at Valpo, probably was not going to get fired. And I'm not saying he did this because he had the great job security, but this certainly helped. So he has Scott on his staff and he is able to delegate a lot to Scott. And, by the end, he is able to hand the reins over to Scott and say, hey, I've built this thing. Now I want you to take over the castle. And he coaches at Valpo for a year before coming back to Baylor. And then, by the way, Homer Drew goes back to Valpo, and I'm pretty sure is doing the same thing with Bryce Drew at the time. And it just goes to show that, there's nothing bad with having extra opinions in there. And Scott was able to learn in that environment, and now he can foster that environment and has been for 20 years at Baylor. This is a sign of some of the great coaches that we've seen, because when I heard this, I immediately thought of Bill Belichick. Now, I'm not going to get all Patriots on you guys, but you guys know I'm a huge Patriots fan. One thing that Belichick had that still not a lot of coaches, even in the NFL, had was he was really able to listen to his assistants and come up with new ideas. All his assistants got head coaching jobs because of not only the Patriots' success, but the responsibility that they took on. In 2007, they went from a not just a 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but a really 10-2 kind of offense to airing it the hell out because Josh McDaniels, their offensive coordinator, said, we have the personnel to do this. And Belichick listened. And to link that back to college basketball, not only is Scott Drew using that method, but I think that's probably why you see some great active coaches out there who do not have coaching trees. Bill Self, Kelvin Sampson, great coaches. Who are their assistants that have gone on to have success as head coaches anywhere else? It's been a long time for Tom Izzo to have Tom Crean, or a long time since Pitino's had one. Roy Williams, other than Hubert Davis, I don't know who's a part of that coaching tree. So even some of these great names don't have that because they don't delegate that kind of responsibility out. The two that you can think of are the two with coaching trees, and that is Scott Drew and Mike Krzyzewski. And it seems like now, a quarter of the NCAA is coached by those guys' former assistants. So I just thought that was a fascinating answer of going even deeper with a layer than what we already knew, that Scott gives out this responsibility. But Jake is saying, well, yeah, here's why. And he went on to say it in that interview. I didn't want to include the whole interview in there, but it is fascinating. You can find it on Twitter and at centexsportsfan.com. But he talks about, I was able to go and recruit a lot of international players. Scott was doing that before, but I kind of tried to take it to the next level. And Scott said, I could do that. This is Jakus talking about it. And another thing that he mentions in there specifically, the quote is, when I got here, we were giving it to Jonathan Motley 600 posts up during the season. And then we became a European ball screen team, and it was successful for both. That was really evident in the 2018-19 season when Tristan Clark got hurt. You remember that? For like warm-ups of the first conference game, he got hurt. And I and some other people thought they were going to finish last in the conference. They ended up making the tournament and winning a tournament game because they became a 3-point shooting team. So not just Scott Drew, but Homer Drew in there as well. This is a legacy of the Drew family of letting other ideas come in through the door and hiring great assistants and letting them be great assistants, and therefore ergo can become great head coaches. And I think John Jakus is the next in line there. Not just because also later in that interview, he called me the best X's and O's guy or in the media or something like that, something to that effect, but because I think he has learned from the Scott Drew tree and will take that with him elsewhere. Now, one more note to add onto the John Jakus thing. He also said in that interview that he's announcing a staff either today or tomorrow, as you're listening to this, Monday or Tuesday. And I would not be surprised. He didn't even really hint at this, but I would not be surprised at all if Bill Peterson is on that staff as probably his right-hand man, his associate head coach. We talked about him at the end of last week. He's been everywhere. He's coached at all levels. He's looking for another opportunity. I think you could see that. And Mosley tipped me off, and he doesn't know any intel on this, but Mosley brought up a good point and said maybe Aditya Malhotra, former Baylor staffer who's now high up in, I believe it's player personnel or scouting with the Phoenix Suns. So you could see someone from an NBA bench come on to John Jakus' staff. John Jakus, a guy who I think is very in tune with the NBA game and will be coaching in the association someday. You could see that as well. So keep on the lookout for that. We'll, of course, have that covered if and when that comes to fruition. Congratulations to the South Carolina Gamecocks, Lady Gamecocks. Do they go by Lady Gamecocks? I'm not sure. To knocking out Iowa for this second year in a row. The Hawkeyes lose in the national championship game. South Carolina was the better team. We heard all about Caitlin Clark, but really South Carolina was the better team. And caps off a tremendous season for women's college basketball. We are going to link this back to Baylor because women's college basketball is as great as it has ever been. You've seen the numbers. I didn't think there was a way that the Final Four game could beat the record they set last week, Iowa and LSU, and they did that. And we haven't seen the numbers yet, but they might well have broken that again yesterday. It is the best time to be associated with women's college basketball. And I had this thought yesterday as the game was wrapping up. I was thinking, did Baylor miss the boat on this? Like, is that going to be some kind of cruel joke that we were great before anyone was watching? Of course, I use that as hyperbole. People were watching, but not nearly the interest that there is now, like legitimate sports interest. This will be the number one talker in college sports talk today. And then secondary will be previewing the men's national championship game. And I just thought, like, has it passed us by? And I've thought about that because Kim Mulkey has become the most divisive figure in college athletics, full stop, not just women's college basketball, but like she's getting skits about her on SNL and like she's a huge figure in the women's college basketball world. And I just remember thinking, like, when these quote unquote hit pieces came out, I was like, why is all of this coming to fruition now? Like, say what you want about Kim, but she has always been this way. This isn't phony. Like, this is who she is. And I mentioned this before on the show, but like, where have you people been? And I'm like, was it because Baylor is so much smaller than LSU? And then I'm thinking, no, it's just because women's college basketball is bigger than it's ever been. So back to the ultimate question. Has Baylor missed the boat on this women's college basketball thing? No. Because if Baylor was not a Sweet 16 team that was returning a bunch of starters, like if we're looking at this last year when they lost in the second round to UConn and they were on the road for it, and we didn't really know what Nikki Ball was or what the foundation was going to be, then yeah, if this was a year ago, I would have said, yes, it's passed them by. But with what we are seeing now in terms of, again, the foundation and what Nikki is building, I can't see Baylor becoming Old Dominion or Cheney or Louisiana Tech. These teams that you don't know now, but if you watch women's college basketball in the 80s at the very beginning, those were the teams. It was Sonia Hogue at La Tech with Kim Mulkey at point guard. It was C. Vivian Stringer at Cheney, and I don't even know who was at Old Dominion. Someone good, because they were always good. Pat Summitt's Tennessee, of course, and even Tennessee is not what it used to be. Not at all what they used to be. So if you had asked me last year, I would have been like, Baylor might be in danger of becoming that. But I think with the style that Nikki wants to play with, that is going to be very, very attractive for women's college basketball players. The game has never been closer to the men's game than it has been right now in terms of playing outside in, spacing the floor, 3-point shooting, all of that great stuff, pushing a pace. And that is what Nikki Collin is going for. And that's not just even a sign of the times. That's just who she is. And, Kim Mulkey is someone who loves the post play. And there will, I guess, always be room for that in the women's game. But in terms of how you're playing it, what Baylor is trying to do fits it really well. So good news, y'all. I don't think Baylor is going to become Cheney or Old Dominion or Louisiana Tech, and hopefully not even Tennessee. I think they will be back in the big time. And even before this year, I would have said the same about USC. They weren't putting up these numbers since, Cheryl Miller was there practically. Another powerhouse of the 80s, USC. So anyway, I don't think Baylor's going to become that. Do I think they're going to be South Carolina? I'm going to hold off on that, but they will be very much involved in this renaissance of women's college basketball, or really the first foray into major college sports discussions for women's basketball. Anyway, let me know if I'm wrong on that. Drop that down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this quarterback competition. I think this is going to be something we're going to monitor all season long. In fact, I already know something we're going to talk about tomorrow. We're going to expand on that quarterback competition a little bit, because there might even be someone else who's throwing his name into that ring. You're not going to want to miss that. It will be back tomorrow. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We will have all that and more on your favorite show, which is, of course, Locked On Baylor.